More movement in the NFL's wild quarterback market, how the New Orleans Saints are impacted with Carson Wentz headed to Washington. The Saints also opened up some more cap space this morning with a couple of restructures and brought back some key young defensive pieces. And we'll take a look at some creative ways to replace Terron Armstead. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, USA Today Saints Wire, Locked On NFL, and of course here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And I want to kick off today's episode of Locked On Saints with another look around the quarterback market because it has been a little bit crazier than we expected, particularly over the course of the last 2 days. 2 days ago, we saw Aaron Rodgers stick around in Green Bay. We saw Russell Wilson be traded to the Denver Broncos. And on Wednesday, things didn't slow down with Carson Wentz being traded from the Indianapolis Colts to the Washington now Commanders. Now, I want to talk about how this specifically impacts the New Orleans Saints because, of course, they are a team that's in the quarterback market. This trade that sends Carson Wentz to Washington back to the NFC East where it all started. And remember, Carson Wentz also got traded a year after Indianapolis traded for him from the NFC East, the Philadelphia Eagles. So how does this impact the New Orleans Saints? Well, there's two key ways that this impacts New Orleans. First of all, it takes a quarterback-needy team off of the market in the Washington Commanders. Now, you might say, well, wait, Ross, they traded away, or the Indianapolis Colts traded away Carson Wentz, so aren't they now a quarterback-needy team? We kind of knew that this was already going to happen, that Carson Wentz was going to be released or traded before the league year began. So with that being the case, Indianapolis has kind of always been in the conversation as a competitor with the New Orleans Saints, the Pittsburgh Steelers, you might say the Carolina Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as teams that are going to be looking for quarterbacks this offseason. Now, the difference is Washington is no longer a part of that list, and they were, but now they're not. So that's good news for the New Orleans Saints, who basically now see one of those competitors for Jameis Winston or Teddy Bridgewater, some of these other free agent quarterbacks, now come off the list. That's good news for New Orleans. That's sort of just one less place that they have to worry about competing or bidding against all of that when it comes to the quarterback spot. The other way that this impacts New Orleans Saints is that it doesn't impact the draft order in the first round ahead of them at 18. Washington owns the 11th pick in the first round, didn't have to give up that first round pick for Carson Wentz and that quarterback. So Indianapolis, a quarterback needy team, does not leap the Saints in the first round or even get back into the first round to potentially snag a rookie quarterback ahead of the New Orleans Saints who might be interested there. And at the same time, it also opens up another trade partner for the New Orleans Saints if they look to jump up ahead of the Cleveland Browns, let's say, for a wide receiver like we discussed a few days ago. You have the Washington football team. Sorry, I'm going to have to get used to that. The Washington Commanders, as well as the Minnesota Vikings going back-to-back at 11 and 12, both of which are places that the New Orleans Saints have dealt with in the past and would allow them to get ahead of other wide receiver needy teams still if they wanted to trade up to do that. And now Washington, who doesn't need a quarterback, trading back from just outside the top 10 to just outside or inside the top 20 would not be a bad move for them. So something to watch come draft day for the New Orleans Saints and potentially the Washington Commanders. But the big key here is that a quarterback needy team has not, at least at this time, left the Saints in the first round, which could spell good news for the New Orleans Saints. And right now, Washington maybe isn't necessarily looking at wide receiver as much, which still helps the Saints in that aspect as well, as Washington is likely to focus on the defensive side of the ball in the draft. So those are two ways that the New Orleans Saints are impacted positively from this move when it comes to Carson Wentz. The Saints, very unlikely to have been in the mix for Carson Wentz, first of all. The other piece is that, they were never really in the running for Rodgers. They were never really in the running for Russell Wilson. As has been reported, Russell Wilson's only team that he wanted to be traded to was the Denver Broncos, and that deal took 2 weeks to come together, so it's been going on for quite a while. The other way that the Saints actually benefit from this, to give you a quick third, I always promise you some land yap, so here you go, is that if Carson Wentz is yielding a third-round pick coming off of a practically healthy season, like a virtually healthy season, I don't know how Jimmy Garoppolo, coming off fresh off of throwing shoulder surgery, who can't throw for 16 weeks and might be cleared by June, I don't know how he gets anything better than a third. I don't know how the 49ers get anything better than a third for Jimmy Garoppolo, which is also good news for the Saints, because if they get desperate enough because Teddy Bridgewater goes elsewhere and Jameis Winston goes elsewhere, then Jimmy Garoppolo becomes a viable option for them. If all the other options go away, you don't want to have to pay a second first-round premium to get an average quarterback that has played only 40 of 65 possible games with the San Francisco 49ers. When you see Carson Wentz getting a third and a third next year that could convey into a second, that's going to drop the trade value for Jimmy Garoppolo quite a bit. So something to also keep in mind there. So the Saints getting away a little bit here with some, not really getting away with anything, but seeing some positive things happen in front of them when it comes to the quarterback market with this Carson Wentz trade. Coming up next, though, in order for the New Orleans Saints to find their next quarterback, they're going to have to open up some cap space, and they've already started to do that. They restructured 3 contracts a couple weeks ago. Now restructuring 2 more contracts this morning. We'll talk about how much money they saved, how close they are to getting under that salary cap, as well as 2 young defensive talented players that they locked down this morning. We got all of that for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But before we get to that, Super Bowl 2022 odds are already out and available for you over at BetOnline. You can go and check them out over at the website. Super easy to navigate, super easy to find, and super easy to use on whether it's your mobile device or your desktop. You've got all these odds that are changing, jumping around. You can bet on the next Seattle Seahawks quarterback. There's a ton with all this quarterback movement that is shifting. So you can follow all of the trends and also get all the news, analysis, and podcasts that you need around those betting trends over at betonline.net. So make sure you go and check them out, and also get to all of your odds, lines, player performance props, all of that stuff as well. So a ton for you to check out. And if you're not interested in football right now, I completely understand. You've got college and pro hoops that are taking up the airwaves right now and taking up a lot of attention. And those, of course, are a ton of fun to bet on, especially March Madness. So go and check everything that you need out over at BetOnline, our exclusive online betting partners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks, as always, making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out that Locked On NFL YouTube page if you're looking for something to do later on today. Lots of fun stuff, including myself and Luke Braun over on Tuesdays. So if you want to see more, you want to hear more of Ross Jackson, Tuesdays, Locked On NFL. We got you covered. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with the New Orleans Saints in terms of their salary cap, right? We know the New Orleans Saints came into last year's offseason $111 million over the salary cap. This year, around $76 million over the salary cap. Felt like peanuts at that point. And so far, the New Orleans Saints are proving us right. It's absolutely peanuts to them. They were able to free up about $34 million or so last week or the week before last when they restructured the contracts of wide receiver Michael Thomas, offensive tackle Ryan Ramczyk, as well as offensive guard Andres Pete. And now this morning, they chip away a little bit further at their overage, which now rests at about $30 to $35 million over the salary cap it rested at about $40 to $45 million, but they were able to knock this down a little bit. And they did so by restructuring the contracts of the defensive end tandem, Cameron Jordan and Tanoh Kpassagnon, who was signed last year on a 2-year deal, looked like his contract was ready to be restructured this year. Cam Jordan, of course, was a prime candidate for restructure this season as well. So $12.4 million or thereabouts freed up with this move, which gets the Saints to right around somewhere between $30 to $35 million over the salary cap. So they've officially now, with 5 restructures, cut their salary cap overage in half, effectively, right? Going from just over $70 million to somewhere around $30 to $35 million. So with those 2 deals, here's what you need to know. Cam Jordan, going to be a New Orleans Saint. He's going to be a New Orleans lifer at this point. I think you can pretty much expect that. It's what he wanted. He wants to get Ricky Jackson's sack record. He wants to remain and retire a New Orleans Saint. This just gets him one step closer to that. Tanoh Kpassagnon will be a New Orleans Saint in 2022. Really liked what he brought to the Saints actually last year. Just had some injury issues that kept him off the field, but his versatility in terms of being able to rush from the interior, but also be a big man on the outside, which we know the Saints really, really love. They like length, they like height, they like all of that at the defensive end spot because you can move it inside to the defensive tackle spot as well. So he'll be somebody to watch next season, by the way. If Peyton Turner is healthy, if the Saints, sign a veteran defensive tackle, maybe Tanoh Kpassagnon ends up playing a little bit more as a penetrating interior rusher to complement David Onyemata a bit, who David Onyemata had more pressures than every other defensive tackle combined last year by natural position. And so Tanoh Kpassagnon could be somebody that could help contribute from the interior if the Saints maybe, bring in a veteran, but then can't draft a young guy or something like that. Then maybe Tanoh gets that additional responsibility. But the Saints not done doing work on that defensive line as well. They bring back a promising young interior defender as well as a promising young edge defender as well. They bring back both Jalen Dalton and Carl Granderson. Carl Granderson had another standout year last year. He was somebody that rotated in quite a bit, could play on the outside, could play on the inside. He partnered really well with Cam Jordan in particular in games where Marcus Davenport was unavailable, Tanoh Kpassagnon was unavailable, Peyton Turner was unavailable. So you see the Saints putting that emphasis already in the trenches yet again on the offensive side. We saw them re-sign Ethan Greenidge. We've seen them now, restructure the contracts of Ryan Ramczyk and Andrus Peat. Now you're seeing it on the defensive side as well, with the contract restructures to Cam Jordan and Tanoh Kpassagnon, and then returning Jalen Dalton as well as Carl Granderson. Jalen Dalton is the one that I really want to focus in on, though, because they bring him back as an exclusive rights free agent. Same thing for Granderson. And what that basically means is that it's a minimum deal, very low tender, doesn't really impact the Saints salary cap that much. It'll be pretty quickly under the top 51 contracts that they'll have until rookies get involved and things like that. But Dalton can't be, reached out to by any other teams or anything like that. The Saints just signed him, so he's a Saint for 2022. And we've seen Jalen Dalton now return to the team over the course of the past couple of seasons based upon what he showed you in camp. I mean, he's never really gotten the opportunity to really get involved in season because of injury. And that's one of the reasons why you can keep this contract so low. And it's nice that he's an exclusive rights free agent because you don't have to overpay to keep him around, knowing the injury history, things like that. And so I think that Jalen Dalton will be somebody to watch if he can stay healthy getting into September. He's a top 53 candidate. I mean, he's a 53-man roster candidate, especially with the interior defensive line made up as it is right now. Now, you should expect the Saints to address that defensive line. Guys like Harrison Phillips will be on the market for pretty cheap, as well as some other, veteran defensive tackles that will be out there. But Jalen Dalton is somebody that they love. I mean, they like him a lot, and he was a big-time standout in camp for a couple of seasons in a row now. So I wouldn't be surprised if he can stay healthy to see him make that 53-man roster and be able to help contribute as a part of that rotation on the interior defensive line. There are a couple of remaining exclusive rights free agents or restricted free agents for the New Orleans Saints: wide receiver Deonte Harty, as well as defensive tackle Shy Tuttle. The Saints brought back Albert Huggins already. They are not going to be tendering Garrett Griffin, the tight end, so expect him to hit the market. But Deonte Harty, Shy Tuttle, two names I wouldn't be surprised to see back in New Orleans in 2022. The tricky part will be with Deonte Harty. Are you bringing him back as a restricted free agent on a deal, whether it be a first-round tender, a second-round tender, or a right of first refusal tender, or are you giving him a longer-term deal, which I wouldn't be surprised to see, honestly, a 3-4 year deal to keep Deonte Harty in New Orleans for an extended amount of time, as opposed to having to try to keep him around again in the 2023 offseason. And the reason why I think that's important is because you know that you're looking to revamp this wide receiver core. Deonte Harty, when healthy and when available, was your probably most consistent wide receiver for the beginning of the season. Marquez Callaway really started to turn it on toward the end of the year, but for the sort of whole of the season, Deonte Harty was your most reliable receiver. And of course, he was your rookie all-pro, return man and everything like that as well. It's where he also helps to flip the field for you and then put you in positions where your offense is starting beyond your own 25, beyond your own 30-yard line, which makes a huge difference for the New Orleans Saints in particular. We saw them be able to win games based on field position last year. Deonte Harty, a big part of flipping that field for the offense, while JT Gray on the other side, who will be a Saint in 2022, he was a big part of flipping the field over on the defensive side as well. So don't expect to see Garrett Griffin at least be tendered. He could potentially still be signed in free agency. That tight end position is going to be one that's going to be interesting to watch, just like the wide receiver spot. But Deonte Harty, I would expect to see back at some point here soon. Shy Tuttle we'll see exactly what happens with him. But for now, Jalen, Dalton, Carl Granderson back in New Orleans, Cam Jordan, Tanoh, Kpassagnon getting their contracts restructured. Now the New Orleans Saints are only about $30 to $35 million over the salary cap, and they are one Marshall Lattimore move away from cutting that in half. And then you have options like Alvin Kamara, as well as, moving on from Bradley Roby. You could restructure Taysom Hill's deal. There's a whole bunch of different ways that the New Orleans Saints can get not only compliant with the salary cap, but get themselves some spending money as well, because there's a bunch of other names out there that can be restructured in other ways to create some salary cap space, and expect the New Orleans Saints to do all of them over the course of the next week, right? The new league year begins on Wednesday. That's when they need to get under the salary cap. And as that new league year begins, there's going to be two big names hitting the free agency market and at least getting the opportunity to test the market. We expect those names to be Marcus Williams and Terron Armstead. We talked about replacements in free agency for Marcus Williams. Now let's talk about some creative ways to replace Terron Armstead if he ends up with a big deal elsewhere and leaves New Orleans this offseason. We'll get to that as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a quick look at replacing Terron Armstead in free agency. And just like we said with Marcus Williams, you're not really going to replace Terron Armstead. Terron Armstead, Marcus Williams, both of them cornerstones of this organization on each side of the ball. Terron Armstead, certainly more so. I mean, he's been with the team longer. He has been a staple for this team on the left side, one of the best left tackles in the NFL when healthy. And I think that the New Orleans Saints letting him test the market, it's just a byproduct of what happens when players are really good. I mean, it's just what happens when you have a good team and you have good players on a team. And so for the Saints, I'm sure they would love to keep Terron Armstead around. Terron Armstead already told our friend over at WWL TV, Brooke Kirchhoffer, that God willing, he'll be in New Orleans in 2022. But it looks like he's going to get the opportunity to test the market. And there's a chance that he ends up commanding north of $22 million per year on the market. Remember, that doesn't necessarily mean $22 million in 2022, $22 million in 2023, $22 million in 2024. Like, those things are going to escalate. Contracts are going to be built up. There's going to be signing bonuses, all those other things. And so that makes it possible the Saints could keep one or the other in Terron Armstead and Marcus Williams, but it seems like they're going to let them test the market first and see what they can get. And if the Saints are willing to match that, then sure. But otherwise, it looks like there's a good chance that both of these players end up walking over the course of free agency. And the unfortunate part is that people are going to talk about it as a salary cap issue when it's not really a salary cap issue, because you need like $5 million to keep either of these guys around for a season. But are you willing to invest the long-term deals in, a left tackle that's over 30 years old and has some injury history and things like that? That's where things get a little bit tricky. So let's talk about how, if Terron Armstead does indeed walk, how the New Orleans Saints can be creative in replacing him. Because look, the left tackle market out in the NFL right now, it's not very good. It's top heavy. There's a couple of good options, a couple of good names, but there's not really that, cost-effective free agent that you can go out and grab that's going to end up making a big difference for you. So unless you're willing to go out there and pay top dollar for a Nate Solder, if you're willing to go out there and pay top dollar for an Eric Fisher, then you end up with Riley Reif. I mean, those are your options, you know what I mean? Or a Jason Peters who's 40 years old. And so I don't think you want to go that route. Dwayne Brown, who's 36, 37 years old. So instead, I think the Saints will try to solve this in-house. And there's a couple of creative ways that they could do it. They could look at the right tackle market and move Ryan Ramczyk over to left tackle, keep James Hurst as your sort of swing tackle, or let him compete on the interior if you want. So you could go with a little bit of a veteran on the right side, a Jermaine Ifedi. You can go with a Trenton Brown, Trenton Brown's probably going to be a little bit too expensive, but like a Morgan Moses who would fit. He's 31 years old, played with the Jets last year, played on a $3.6 million average per year deal. He would be right around $5 million. This is market value according to Spot Rack. So you can go that way to where you're a little bit more okay dealing with the 30-year-old with some injuries on the right side than you are the 30-year-old with some injuries on the left side, knowing that you've got James Hurst that can plug in at right tackle, knowing that you've got Landon Young, who the Saints have been training up at right tackle, and then go to the draft to find the young left tackle as well, to where if you can do that, then great. You could potentially start the young left tackle and then keep Ryan Ramczyk over on the right. The other option would be to solely rely on the draft, which is not usually very advisable, right? You can get a low-end tackle on the market, a Bobby Hart or something like that, just for depth. And then you can go to the draft and then see if you land a left tackle like a Trevor Penning in round one, a Kellen Diesch later on in the draft. Some of these other names you could potentially grab in the second or third rounds, like a Petit Frere out of Ohio State, for instance, just to throw a name out there. And then you could have them start at left tackle and then, or work with them through camp and see if you're comfortable with them starting at left tackle. Then if so, you can go that route and then have Ryan Ramczyk over at right tackle. Or you focus on keeping all the other in-house pieces, which so far the Saints have done a good job with, and then move Ryan Ramczyk to left tackle and then just have James Hurst start at right tackle. The idea of moving Ryan Ramczyk to left tackle is already built into the Saints' possibilities with the contract structure that they built for him, which isn't huge. Like there's this whole conversation around like, oh, if you move him to left tackle, then there's these incentives and you have to pay him so much more money. It's like $1 million per year if he gets first team all pro at left tackle, not just if he takes snaps there, you got to pay him $17 million more. No. It's not a huge escalation at all. And so it'd be pretty simple for the Saints to do that and, see if he gets first team all pro. And if he does, then great. Here's an extra $1 million per year in the future years of your contracts. It's not that big of a deal, right? So those are a couple of different ways that the Saints could address that left tackle spot. Are any of them going to be foolproof and keep you from, seeing some type of drop off on the offensive line? Probably not. I mean, asking Ryan Ramczyk to move from right to left, at least you still got Ryan Ramczyk, who arguably at times was the better tackle on the team over certain stretches of games, but Terron Armstead was consistently the better tackle on the team. So you're still going to have a little bit of a drop off. You're asking him to change everything, like mirror everything that he's been doing for the past few seasons since he was drafted in 2017. And then you also end up adding on top of that, James Hurst playing at right tackle, who honestly was serviceable there and struggled a bit when, other pieces of the offensive line weren't available last year, but could at least give you that stopgap, or even somebody that plays, 6 games at right tackle and then you move in a younger option or something like that, like a Landon Young if he develops well. Then you've got Calvin Throckmorton who can play tackle and guard. You've got Landon Young who can play left tackle or right tackle. So you have the versatile pieces in terms of the 6th offensive lineman, the things that the Saints like to do if they keep that style of play too. Like, we don't know. Maybe the Saints offensive line changes from being 6 offensive linemen to 5 offensive linemen. And then that swing tackle idea becomes really only important in case of injury as opposed to a part of the built-in game plan. Then all of a sudden, it's one less body that you need, quote unquote, right? Air quotes for that. So there's a lot of different creative ways for you to be able to recover a little bit from the loss of Terron Armstead. Again, nothing's going to be perfect around that, but the New Orleans Saints are in a situation to where they can have a plan, and obviously do if they're going to allow Terron Armstead to even test the market in the first place. Then clearly they have an expectation and a plan in terms of what they expect to be able to do if Terron Armstead does leave New Orleans this free agency period. So we'll see exactly how it is that they actually handle all of it. Fingers are crossed that maybe today takes a little bit of a chill, you know what I mean? And just kind of chill out a little bit, NFL, and no more quarterbacks being shipped around for maybe the next couple of days. And then that way we can continue on with our Cody Burns outlook in terms of what he could do with a guy like Deonte Harty if the Saints are able to re-sign him, as well as other free agent options to keep an eye out on as the tampering period opens up on Monday. Could the New Orleans Saints get involved early in free agency, earlier than we usually see them? There's certainly one specific candidate that makes that possible. We'll talk about that in tomorrow's episode. And I thank you, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Eric Crocker, Ryan Tracy, Locked On NFL Draft, giving you everything you need to know about these upcoming NFL draft prospects, including potential replacements for Terron Armstead. So lots for you to go and check out over there. And as always, I appreciate y'all so much for making me a part of your daily routine. For everything you need in between these episodes on your New Orleans Saints, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.